Now today I'm joined by my good friend Ivan Stokes, who goes by the screen name ILS007 on PokerStars, and it's been far from your average few weeks for Ivan. He recently has just been crowned the World Championship of Online Poker main event champion, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind ride where he took down over 1 million, and we're looking forward to, first of all, diving into that journey and success of that chapter. But Ivan's story is far from an overnight success, and it's been a long ups and down ride to get to where he is. So I'm very excited for you to join me today, Ivan, and going into your journey to where you are now.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So last time we spoke on camera, we just finished off a strongman event,
Yeah.
and which you got me to do, and we both have a love for fitness and personal training and strength stuff. But today I want to focus predominantly on your journey and really understanding your successes. So first question I want to ask is, how does it feel being the WCOOP main event champion, which was literally a few weeks ago? How does it feel?
It feels amazing. It feels a bit weird, actually. You kind of hear of other people winning like the main flagship event, and then you kind of think, you don't really think that one day it will be you. Obviously, poker's got a lot of variance as well. But to actually have won it, yeah, it's amazing, but it's still taking a bit of time to process it. And just reflect on the journey, because everything happens quite quickly, and then you need a bit of time to kind of step back and really reflect on what's actually, transpired.
Well, we'll reflect more on that main event win. Firstly, though, I want to get a bit of background and bring your story to light. So you strike me as quite a competitive guy. I've trained with you many times in the gym. I know your approach to poker and life is competitive driven. When did you realize growing up you were quite competitive? Any stories that come to mind?
Yeah, sure. I would say that you're pretty competitive as well, actually.
Sure.
So that's probably why we get on quite well. In terms of stories, I guess there's like kind of more of a superficial story and examples that would be like the purpose, the reason for this, and then maybe some more like deep, profound ones which kind of shape me. So in terms of like the more superficial, I grew up in a family where sports was like everything pretty much. So my dad played a lot of sports, and then also played with us a lot of sports, and kind of encouraged us to sort of enjoy them, watching them playing, just being outside every day. So kind of with that environment, I just got very familiar with competing, being in competitive environments, enjoying it, looking forward to kind of trying to win. And then even with my brother, just playing video games and trying to beat each other and things like this. So I guess it's just like a household which that was just the norm, really. I didn't really think of it as like specifically like a competitive environment as such. Obviously, kind of young at the time. But now that I look back on it, yeah, it just kind of it was quite catered towards that. But without any sort of pressure or that type of direction of like you need to win or something like that. It was more that we were just enjoying doing stuff which was competitive by nature. So yeah, I would say that was like the sort of the superficial background, and then the sort of more profound stuff was that I had a few things in my life which kind of shaped me from a young age, which sort of gave me a very deep, strong competitive drive, which only even now I'm sort of coming to understand what my journey actually is and what those things represent through therapy sessions and things like that. So basically, when I was young, I lost my mother. So that was quite a traumatic event. And also I was in a household where we didn't really talk about things very much. My dad's kind of old school, so it's sort of like a household where you sort of, you try and get on with things. You're there for each other, but it's best not to talk about difficult stuff because, I don't know, like that was the sort of old-fashioned mentality where if we don't talk about it, we can kind of ignore it. It will just kind of go away and disappear, which obviously in today's world we know doesn't really work out very well. But that was kind of how it was. So I think that kind of gave me more of a sort of survivorship mentality where I was just like, the world is a place where bad stuff can happen. And also I was a bit more by myself without my mother. So kind of, you figure out how to survive and how to thrive in the environment and with the obstacles that brings to you. So yeah, I think that was like quite a major one. And then there was a few other ones as well, I would say. Another one was I visited Sri Lanka when I was quite young. I'm half Sri Lankan by ethnicity. So that was like quite an impactful trip to do. And I was pretty young at the time. I think it was like 8 years old or something like that. And I just remember one situation where I was just like waiting in a van to like go somewhere. And then we're seeing these sort of orphan children with missing limbs and just in pretty dire circumstances. I just remember at that age kind of naively just thinking that this is impossible, how can the world be this way? You know, I'm on holiday, enjoying myself pretty much, getting taken care of, and then there's people that just, you know, are really struggling, and also often with smiles on their faces. That's the irony. Trying to make the best of what they have. So I think it kind of instilled in me this belief system where I need to be very grateful for what I have. You know, I've been given dealt good cards regardless of any, you know, stuff that's happened with me. And I need to really give everything the best that I can to sort of take advantage of the privilege that I've been given. I think also it's kind of linked deeply to losing my mother. She was on the Sri Lankan side, so I always felt like I needed to attach a bit more to my heritage, and I struggled to do that because I kind of lost that side. So I kind of, yeah, I guess that also made me feel like more of a connection towards you know, the suffering that can go on, obviously everywhere, but what I experienced and saw firsthand when I was there. And it probably meant more to me that way because, like, somehow I'd created like an attachment towards it in some way, and it was my way to sort of reconnect and live my life's purpose in a way which was sort of fill in the gap, so to speak. So that's kind of what I'm trying to make sense of it now. I don't know, it's like just a theory, but it kind of makes sense to me, and I've done some therapy sessions where I talked about these types of things, trying to connect the dots. And yeah, it's kind of a common thing actually. If a child loses a parent, it's quite common that they take on a role of sort of, you know, responsibility in every sense, and kind of become an adult at a young age as well, I think. So yeah, I'd say those were kind of the main things.
How did this impact you growing up? What were some of the choices you were making? It seems like you did have to grow up very quickly in your environment. How did you notice yourself maybe making choices different to those around you who maybe weren't growing up as quickly?
It's kind of hard to say really because whilst I had that background, I had a pretty liberal upbringing as well. So I was sort of left to my own devices, allowed to kind of make my own decisions and do what I wanted to. So yeah, I mean it's hard to say. I guess I just was more independent. Was just used to kind of making my own decisions, making my own way. We were kind of also my dad did a great job to kind of raise us as like a single dad. I've got two siblings as well, so it was quite tough. You know, it was very tough for him. So like in that household, we kind of all had to take on responsibility to make everything work out. And I remember doing chores from a very young age. You know, an age that people wouldn't really believe, but that was kind of normal for us. You know, we just kind of took our role, did our stuff, and that was normal life. So I think that actually helped me in many ways. You know, you got to find the right balance, but that kind of combination of having freedom but also having discipline and responsibility was quite a good combination to kind of mold me into somebody that, yeah, can sort of take on responsibility and really, you know, try hard in situations that other people might have had too much of a cushy existence to really go to that extra mile, if you know what I mean.
As you were growing up, what sort of things were you gravitating towards during this age? Was there any interest that you were pursuing before poker, like your early teen years? Is there anything you were being competitive with or trying to pursue?
Yeah, definitely. I think like a larger part, like my childhood was more towards chess actually, rather than poker, and also the sports that I was playing. So I played a lot of cricket as well. I got to a pretty high level at that, and I was kind of one step away from kind of playing for national team at cricket. At the same time, I was already part of the international fold for chess. So sort of had to make a decision between those two games. Went for chess in the end, and yeah, that was like the main thing that consumed me. It was like a nice escape because it's something that I could. It was something that I could do whenever I wanted to. The internet was already around by that point. I'm not that old, and yeah, I was able to play online chess whenever I get back from school or whatever. And yeah, it was like an intellectual pursuit, which was kind of like a form of escapism as well, really, just get away, get into my own bubble and do that thing. So yeah, that was like the main thing that I did prior to poker. And then that was really, yeah, I mean, chess basically became poker in essence when I turned 18, more or less.
You mentioned this escapism, trying to do something almost to get away from your situation or immerse yourself fully in something. What were some of the other maybe positives you got from, say, chess, from sport, from competing? I know myself, when I do something immersively, there's an intrinsic kind of reward system that's going on. So for you, yeah, chess in particular and also sport, what were some of the internal drives or internal satisfactions you were getting from that pursuit?
Yeah, so I think for me in general, doing something competitively and really immersing yourself in it just puts you into a different state of being in general. I guess it would be kind of considered the flow state for most people. And in chess, definitely feel like that. In many like tournament matches that I would play, I would just forget everything around me. There could be like 20, 30 people watching around, and I don't even know they're there. Like it doesn't exist. Time barely exists. You're just sort of gazing, and everything around you disappears all of a sudden. And it's just like quite a profound state of being. I guess that's kind of like a higher level of consciousness, akin to maybe, meditation or something like that, where you can kind of forget about the external surroundings. You can forget about like your past thoughts, your future expectations, and instead just kind of be really present. So I think in general we kind of gravitate to that, whatever way we get that. Some people get it through, sport and competition, others through, painting or through meditation or yoga. But it's just like a beautiful place to be, and I guess that this has been my channel to kind of access that all this time.
Amazing. And when did poker become the vehicle for that channeling?
That's a good question, actually. I guess when I got into it pretty hard, but it is one of these games, especially online, where because the way to make money was generally to play multiple tables, you just got like loads of action happening on lots of tables, you kind of get in a flow state in terms of I'm overloaded with decision making, so I don't have time or energy to expend on anything else. But on the other hand, you're not like super fixated on one specific thing at any given moment. Like in chess, it's kind of the opposite. There's one specific moment and you're fixated on that and almost like perfectionist about it. And in poker, whilst you have those moments, potentially it's like less common. So I guess it was like, once I got used to just playing a lot of tables, being immersed on having like a lot of demands, at that point probably was getting used to just getting into flow state very often when I played. When you're playing more recreationally and you've only got like one or two tables up, it can actually be kind of boring. Or when you're playing live poker and it takes a long time for the action to come around. So probably wasn't as engaged at that stage, more just enjoying playing the game, but was not really getting that kind of really next level experience, which I got a bit later.
Yeah, it's very interesting actually. I think people don't realize there's almost like two types of focus. One's that kind of singular focus, like playing chess, where there's only one move and your full attention's on it. The other one's where it's more an immersive of stimulus, like say you're multi-tabling tournaments, you're multi-tabling cash games, and you've got so much coming at you that there's no space in your mind to think about anything else other than the action. So for you, you've had both experiences. You've had both the chess experience and the poker experience. Any differences in those? Like obviously, as you talked about, they are different. Anything you notice that's like predominantly different about, let's say you're very skilled at playing lots of tables, lots of stimulus. Is anything different about that experience compared to a singular focus on one task?
Yeah, I guess it recruits different types of skills. For example, in chess, you need to be very patient. So, I mean, obviously in poker, it's very important to be patient as well. But I mean, in terms of like how your mind is operating in the immediate term, in poker, you don't really need to be patient because you always have a demand of like something to kind of figure out. But in chess, you kind of need to sit on your hands almost literally. In fact, as a kid, I got taught literally sit on your hands while you play, so you don't do something daft. So yeah, like that was like one of the key differences. Also, yeah, I think clarity of thought as well. Sometimes in chess, you kind of accumulating a lot of ideas and concepts for a situation to make sense of it. And it's quite easy to forget those, and you need to kind of refresh. Like every time there's a new move played, you need to kind of refresh. You need to retain the information that's still relevant for the position, and then identify the stuff that's now changed. In poker, that's also true to some degree. The range versus range of the players will change depending on like each action that's taken place prior. But you don't really need to accumulate. Really need to retain quite so much information. Chess is one game that lasts. Potentially 50 moves, and there's unlimited possibilities, more or less. Whereas poker, you're playing individual hands, and each hand, in some cases, will kind of play itself, and especially at the higher level, you kind of know what you need to do, and the other player knows what they need to do. But in chess, it's a bit more abstract and always unique. Like, no matter whether you follow the game for the first 10, 15, 20 moves the same as what's been done 1,000 times prior, you're going to find new territory and terrain much more like uniquely, I think, than in poker. But poker's still relatively unexplored. I think chess has been studied for many more years than poker. So probably a lot of the newer stuff and stuff that will emerge in the future will kind of make poker maybe seem a bit more like chess in that regard, perhaps.
I've never thought of chess like that, but it makes sense, the accumulation and retention of information, because everything's one big, long, almost game tree,
Yeah.
and it plays to an end, a finish point. Whereas in poker, obviously, there's hands played, but there's different opponents involved. Like, there's almost like short finishes everywhere, so you don't need to retain as much of the kind of the storyline of what's happening in each situation. So I never thought of chess as being almost trains retention and the ability to hold your mind on a kind of story narrative for a longer period of time. So yeah, how do you feel like that's helped you with poker? Because I feel like many players would struggle with that skill set. If I said, right, you've got to focus on one thing and one thing only, they'd be like, give me more stimulus, give me more to do. How do you think that ability to hold your attention like on single stuff, especially an MDT player these days, that must help a lot, like when it comes to final table scenarios, when it comes to there's not much stimulus around you. So yeah, how have you seen that help you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps with the patience thing as well, especially when you get deep in a tournament and you don't have so many decisions to make, but the decisions that you are going to make are going to be really important, to have presence of mind and to really, yeah, be able to focus enough, but not too much to kind of hyper focus and, yeah, like make up stuff that doesn't even exist. Sometimes you can overthink when you have too much time. And yeah, like I think the other thing that it helps with is in chess, like you have the same situation that's you have a situation that's similar and evolving, but you are always open-minded to what you need to change. So let's say something is unexpected that the opponent does. It wasn't part of your plans. And then you're like, oh wow, okay, this is not the same situation that I thought it was. You're very open to reevaluating. So chess engines, like the computer engines, they have what's called an evaluation. They evaluate the position to say who's winning, basically, or if it's an equal position, and they can give it like a numerical value. And basically, as a human player, you have to do the same thing. You kind of have to have your own inner evaluation, and you need to evaluate like what are the advantages of the position for you, the disadvantages, etc. And you need to be very flexible with your thinking. The evaluation will change with every node, like with every decision. Whereas in poker, I think a lot of players kind of like, okay, I've got pocket aces, cool, got the best hand, can't lose now, and now I'm entitled to win, like I should have the best hand at every single moment, and they can just get very attached to just the fact that they had the best hand, so they need to win the hand somehow. I guess coming from chess, I kind of got used to the idea that everything can change. You need to be open with your perspective, and it's actually like a critical skill and a very good one to have, to be kind of objective and to just change the evaluation as required. So I think that's a big advantage in poker, because we can get a lot of anchoring bias emotionally in the game, and especially with all the pressure that comes with it as well. So yeah, I think that's one of the key differences and things that helped me.
Yeah, that's huge. I think people underestimate anchoring bias as a psychological framework of thinking. And let's say you get pocket aces, ace king. There's certain hands that excite you, especially if you've been card dead or you're playing tournaments. And very quickly that excitement leads into this can be a big pot, and the flop comes down. It's okay for your range, and it's very hard for players to stop that excitement on a new street and like reevaluate. But as you mentioned with chess, you're used to almost like every opportunity, every information gained, reassess the position and go for a process. But I think a lot of players are almost thinking, I'm betting 3 streets here, or like, especially with big hands, when you hit a certain flop and you hit a certain texture, or against an opponent who's like a bit spewy, I'm calling them down here no matter what. And you get this, you anchor to a way of thinking, but also like this emotional side of the anchoring, which I think is very hard for players to sometimes spot until after, and they go, oh, I should have reevaluated. So for you, it sounds like a really big skill to have trained yourself to reevaluate positions, let's call it, based on new information. So flops, turns, rivers, obviously in poker you would reevaluate based on new information, but also things that are going on around you as well, like especially in a live context. I'm not sure how much live you play these days, but yeah, it seems a real big skill set. So let's piece some of the story together. So for you, you started poker in 2007, which is a long time ago.
Yeah, a bit of a dinosaur.
Yeah, so tell me through at that time what led you into poker, what was the attraction of the game, and what were some of your expectations going down that path?
Yeah, sure. So back then it was pretty much around time I was turning 18, and I had a lot of chess friends at a pretty high level in chess playing internationally that were also playing a bit of poker on the side, and we were all pretty young, 18, 19, 20 years old, and these guys were making some good money with poker, at least relative to like what I thought was possible back then. And I was kind of amazed. I thought, well, wow, this is incredible. You're doing very well at chess, but then on the side you can actually make like more or less a living from poker. And I was quite intrigued by that. This was probably actually when I was around 15, 16 years old. I was kind of seeing this happen. So when I finished school, I had the opportunity to take a gap year before I went to university. And I thought, I'll try and travel a little bit, make a little bit of money, just doing a regular job in a call center. And then with the money that I save, I'm also going to try and give this poker thing a shot to see what it's all about. And yeah, that's how I got into it, and then never looked back after it. Yeah.
So starting out, when you saw some of your chess friends doing well with it, what were you thinking? Were you trying to go, right, maybe I can make a living with this, maybe I can support myself and do a bit of traveling? What were the kind of the novice opinion of poker coming into it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have much expectation. I was just first of all thinking maybe I could make money from this. Maybe I could actually make extra money, and it could be like a side hustle. And I was not really thinking of it any more than that. I kind of expected I'll go to uni and then I'll get a job, basically. So these kind of checkpoints and milestones kind of happened later. Initially, it was just that there seems to be some opportunity here to make a bit of side money. I'm going to be going to university in a year, and it'd be nice to have a bit of money in the wallet for when we go out. And that's pretty much what it was. I mean, literally, some nights I would be like, okay, we're going to go out, and I'm going to try and make enough to cover my night before I leave. And if I can do that, it's going to be an amazing night. So that was kind of how it would go down. And then sometimes I would come back a little bit earlier, a little bit drunk, and I'd be like, okay, let's see if I can make it back what I spent. And that was kind of the way that I was going about it. And then eventually I was doing a bit better, and then it became a bit more structured and a bit more tangible, the opportunity.
I can relate to that mindset growing up. So apparent in my culture as well. Sometimes we'd go to the casino and we'd go to the roulette wheel, and all of us would put like say £50 on like red or black, and I'd go, right, let's cover the night out. Obviously it's a very high variance strategy, and sometimes we had to spend double the night out. But the mindset of like, let's cover my immediate cost with what I'm going to do. And I think when you're young, sometimes that's the frame of thinking that you're in, and that's how it starts. So for you, when did poker start to become more serious? You mentioned you were trying to make some money in your build-up of starting university. How did poker and university kind of overlap for you?
It overlaps the whole way, to be honest, because I was doing it in the gap year, and then I continued doing it during uni, and then I basically just kept having more success year on year. So then the amount that I put into the game increased as well. So I think probably by the age of around 20, I was already like pretty heavily into poker, and then all the time spare that I had pretty much went into poker, not so much into like my uni. And yeah, I think that was pretty much the point in terms of when I kind of treated it a bit more like a job or a career. Probably towards the end of my degree, around the age of 21, 22. Also, that was around the time that I was going to have to make some decisions as to what I wanted to do in my life. And then I was thinking, you know what, I'm doing quite well with this. If I was able to go full time and dedicate to it, there's nothing to really suggest that I wouldn't be able to do decently from this. And maybe I should wait until I see how poker goes before I go into something else. So yeah, I think around that time was when I was like, okay, this poker is now my thing, and I'm going to give it a shot.
And when you made that decision, let's say you've graduated uni, you started to think about poker as a career option. How did you approach it then? Did anything change when you went kind of pro, so to speak, or going full time with it in terms of how you were thinking about the game and how you were approaching it?
Yeah, definitely. But it's kind of one of these things where the changes tend to happen after the fact rather than like beforehand. You know, now that got a lot of experience in poker and in like performance environments in general, there's a lot of things that you can prepare, you can research, and you can make amazing plans of action that hopefully will work out well. But back then it was like kind of learning on the fly and learning from mistakes, trial and error, hearing someone else doing something a better way and then just trying to copy them more or less. I mean, I was really a fish. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that there were coaching sites. I didn't know that there were tools to learn the game better. I just had some books pretty much, and I read a few of those and was playing. Then I would just watch opponents and just see what they were doing, try and like learn why they're doing what they're doing. So, and then in terms of the performance side, yeah, I mean, it was non-existent really. I was just like, how many hours can I play? That was the main thing, and then maybe how many hours I can study once I started learning about resources to use to study the game. But it's like, yeah, it's kind of amateur, to be honest. It was just, and also when you're young, you have unlimited energy, so I didn't really need to prime myself. It's just like, how can I physically have enough hours to do what I want to do? And then I didn't really need to plan my sleep or my nutrition or anything really. And poker was pretty easy back then as well, so you didn't really need to study much either. So it really was kind of rudimentary. And then I'd say fast forward 10 years, like it's kind of the exact opposite to that now. So that's where we are today.
Yeah, I think back then, that's probably like 12, 13 years ago. Poker was very amateur then, like just getting started. I started probably 2 years after that. 2011 was probably my first year of playing. And yeah, no one really had a clue what we were doing. You could show up and just play any sort of basic strategy and do fairly well. And yeah, you didn't need that kind of professional approach to the game to have success at it. So for you, when did things start to really pick up in terms of the progression of your poker career? When were some of the years where you're like, things are starting to really, pick up now? I know you went down the Supernova Elite pathway in terms of high volume. I did the same as well with my format. Yeah, how did things progress from those kind of early days into having more and more success?
So let me think. Yeah, I think around that time, a little bit later, after I graduated from uni, so around the age of 22, I found this Supernova Elite thing. I went actually to a PokerStars dinner that I was invited to as a Supernova. So for people that don't know, Supernova was like 100,000, I don't know, frequent player points, I think it was, and then Supernova Elite was 1 million, and it's based on how much you play. So yeah, like I got invited to some dinner with Chris Moneymaker actually, and the PokerStars staff, and like some other like players that were a combination of Supernovas and Supernova Elites. And Chris was just like the nicest guy. Had an amazing evening. Everybody had a great time. We were exchanging ideas, and I was hearing about guys that were already doing the SNE thing, the Supernova Elite thing, and it kind of sounded doable. And for me, it was this thing that was impossible. Like, why on earth would I think about doing it? And then it was like, well, he broke it down day by day, this kind of professional way of doing it. Like, this is how many hours it is, this is how many days a week, this is how many tables, this is the buy-in that you have to play. It's like, oh, if you just do those things, then you get there. So I came home kind of inspired, thinking, wow, I'd love to. And I was hearing that you could maybe like get a Porsche like car with like your points and stuff. I was like, that would be so badass. Like, I would love to do that. So try to figure out how to make it happen. And then that was like just a few months before the end of the year. It was a little bit late to the party. It was August, I think, actually. And then I did it that year. I mean, I wasn't that good at that stage, so I was making a lot of my profit from the rake back. In fact, I actually lost before rake back, so I don't know, like rake back might have been worth $120,000 or something. I can't quite remember. And then I maybe lost a certain amount at the tables, and then what was the margin was my profit that I took home. But it was still really good, and obviously the achievement, and then kind of just like the mindset thing of what's possible, and also now I've done something that was like really intense, and I've been able to succeed, like running a marathon, and then it kind of breaks you in, and then you're ready for the next one.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I can get sucked into the Supernova Elite chase myself as well. So for those who aren't familiar with this kind of language about Supernova Elite, basically it was probably 2014 or 2013 it started, maybe earlier.
Yeah, something like that.
It went through to 2016, 2017, and basically it was a very high volume grind. Unless you played super high stakes and you could do it effortlessly. If you played six max or heads up sit and goes, mid stakes, the volume was like crazy. Like I had to play some like 330 days, 10-hour days.
Oh my god!
In my first
And
year.
you did it.
I did it, yeah.
Wow.
That was when I was playing $200, $300 heads up sit and goes. And one guy in my format who I didn't realize was just an absolute maniac who just played every hour of the day. He did Supernova Elite playing hundreds. So I was like, all right, I've got no excuse. This guy plays less than me, so I can definitely do it playing double the stakes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was signing up for. I signed up for it in January. Well, you sign up in terms of mentally signed up for it.
Yeah.
And then I got to April. I was like, I'm on pace for it. Didn't realize that you actually have a life as well. And you do stuff in the summer, and there's holidays, and there's all of a sudden I fell way behind. And then I remember October through till December, my final year, I think I took half day Christmas Day. I took the 9th of December off because there was Sports Personality of the Year award was in the city I was studying at Leeds Uni, and that was only that time off. And looking back on that first year, I was like, didn't have a clue what I was signing up for in terms of the volume. But at the same time, doing that kind of high volume approach, same as you, opened up almost like an avenue. Like if you work hard towards an outcome and there's a path laid out, and the only thing getting in the way is work ethic, discipline, you can do that. And when you prove to yourself you can do something like that, it does create a way of thinking that I can do more than I think. It's like it breaks a belief system, a barrier. So I had the same as you, where I didn't really think I was capable of it, signed up for it, ended up doing it, kind of regretted a few things in the approach I took because I made so many sacrifices to make that happen. The following year I did it much better because I was playing higher stakes for one, but it was more manageable. So for you, coming out of that Supernova Elite kind of quest, you actually went back to studying more again. So I'm really curious to know, having success in poker for me kind of steered me away from going academic and going career paths, but for you kind of kept that open as well. So tell me through like how having success in poker, you're still trying to juggle where to go with your kind of options.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being completely transparent, it wasn't really to do with options at all. I wanted to go to Australia, and that was a good way to stay there for a long time to get a student visa, and I like the university life. So it was like the combination of the two just made it quite appealing. So yeah, I pretty much did it for that, and also I thought the first degree that I did, I kind of just did what I thought would make sense to do. I did international business. It was okay. It was fine. But then I thought for the second one, I could kind of choose something that I'm a bit more interested in, at least at the time. So I studied like international politics, and it was really good. Like I enjoyed it a lot, and obviously enjoyed being in Australia, and was doing the poker at the same time. I guess back then I was still at a stage where, whilst I knew that I could make good money from poker, both like personally, but especially with like some external like factors, like people in my life at the time, they kind of encouraged me not to kind of go that hard into the poker, because based on their belief system, you could do something better with your life. You know, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a professional. Why would you want to be a poker player, kind of thing? So I think that kind of created a belief system in myself that, yeah, I can do this thing for the short term, but it's not gonna be forever. So I might as well, skill up and get ready for the real life, the adult life, so to speak. And then over time, as I got a bit older, and then my relationship changed as well, then I was able to kind of be liberated from that belief system. It's like, okay, I'm actually pretty good at this thing. There's not really any reason not to just keep going with it, and that's what I'm going to do. So there was like that kind of sea change. But in terms of like juggling the university and the poker, it was fine. Like it was quite a lot of, I was not able to do in poker what I would have been able to do without studying. But on the other hand, it was like a very rounded experience for life in general. I feel like if I'd just done poker, I would have missed out on quite a lot of life experiences that I had. And then inadvertently, they probably helped me a lot with my poker anyway, especially on the coaching side and the business side as well. So yeah, like that was pretty much it back then. And then after I finished my master's degree, then it was more or less full on poker. But I did have a brief period of doing like a personal trainer qualification as well, just out of passion as well. I think as poker players, sometimes you feel, sometimes you can feel a little bit lost. You don't know where you're going next because you've been doing the same thing day in, day out, kind of monotonously. And then to kind of, find your passion and really pursue it, I think is a great thing. And even as a poker player, you might have that within poker, and hopefully you do. But there's every chance that you'll also have it outside of poker. And it's not like you necessarily have to make a choice between the two. It's more like poker should fuel your life and your passions and your dreams. And if not, then what's the point playing it in the first place? So I kind of saw it that way. It's like poker's given me the opportunity to do this cool thing. I'm just going to do it anyway. And then afterwards, if poker's like my main day job, I'm still just going to go back to the day job, and that's absolutely fine.
I love that, because most players would use the kind of framing of, oh, I'll do it after poker. I'll do it once at a time. And in reality, as you said, poker is there to create a bit of life for you, create freedom for you, and you can do stuff alongside poker if you wanted to. Obviously, it's not for everyone. People might get sidetracked, but for you, you were like, I want to do this. I want to do personal training. I want to get in there. So what was it about personal training? And we've trained a lot together. We both enjoy strength training a lot. What was it at this time about personal training that drew you to it enough that you wanted to put some of your time into getting qualified?
I think one thing I would distinguish as well is that in my case, it was a little bit different because most of my professional life in poker was coaching at that point in time when I went into the PT. I think as a player, you do get a little bit obsessive about the grind and like trying to become a better player and overcome the competition. And to take like a few months away to do something is quite difficult. In fact, one of my biggest challenges happened when I took a long time in poker, happened after like a long break away. So maybe we'll talk about that a bit later, but I thought that might be worth mentioning.
So yeah, you mentioned having a tough challenge when you took time away from poker. I want to know, was this the biggest rock bottom moment of your career? And talk us through what was happening during this period when you took some time off and challenges.
Yeah, sure. So that was quite early on in my career. I'd pretty much been winging it until then. That was like when I was about 18, 19 years old. And then I thought, well, I made a bit of money. I'm just going to go on holiday for a few months after the university semester ends. So I went off, enjoyed a nice holiday with some friends. And after a few months, thought, okay, I'll come back to poker and I'll just start printing some money, playing this game. It's pretty easy. And then just went like 10,000 sit and goes without making any money an entire year. And that was after being like top 3 in the world, at least on the rankings, just before I went on holiday. I thought, how is this possible? It's kind of impossible. How can you be kind of at the top before you go away, and within a few months suddenly you can't make a penny? So that was like the first moment where I really was challenged in terms of poker. I was thinking about quitting, that I don't have the advantage that I thought I had. The game's got tougher, or maybe I was just lucky. I was kind of searching for answers and searching for coaching and ways to improve, and also like reflecting on how I got there in the first place. So it was a combination of, I wasn't professional to begin with in how I went about the game before I went on holiday. And then the holiday was kind of just like, the straw that broke the camel's back, basically. I'm going to gradually get further behind, and then I'm going away for 3 months. And the game was probably, evolving quite quickly at that point back then. So, yeah, I just kind of fell behind. And I kind of forgot what I knew as well, because I didn't really have like a system. I had ideas in my head and I would remember them when I played, but I didn't really have a formal system. So, like you can kind of do that and wing it when you're doing it all the time. But if you go away for a few months, you kind of forget. Maybe like a language, if you've not really kind of like learned it like thoroughly, you'll remember some words when you're doing it every day, but when you go away, you've forgotten half the words, and then you've got to go back, to square one more or less. So that's what happened to me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Not as extreme, but like I remember doing like the Supernova Elite grind where you're playing every single day. You have some ideas in your head and you feel really sharp, but you're playing every day. And I'd take like say friends would come to visit and I'd take 2 weeks off, and I'd come back and I'd be like, I've forgotten so much. Like I'm so like rusty would be the term poker players often use, but I just felt like I lost so much. And exactly what you said, it would happen. I hadn't like systemized my thinking process, and there was so many things that when you're in a performance state you can execute on, but if you haven't really thought them through deeply, you lose them over time. So for you coming back, I'm really curious when people hit a challenging roadblock, how they get past it. So for you, you were one of the top 3 players in the world. Then you came back and you couldn't beat the games for a long period of time. For a lot of players, that would have been the end of the story. They'd be like, right, well, things moved on and on to the next thing. You didn't do that. Why did you decide to go back into poker, and what did you do to get yourself back to being a winning player again?
I think the main thing was that I just like started digging. I started like trying to get better, not just with my own like weak efforts, but like I'm going to try and find every advantage. So is a coaching available for this game? Is there software that you can study with? So yeah, I kind of like leveled up my skills that way. And then from a mindset perspective, I guess it's just like I just wanted to win at this game. I wasn't really satisfied to just like fail for a year, especially with it being a year. If I had done badly for a few weeks and I just didn't feel like playing anymore, and I wasn't really convinced that I wanted to play the game, then maybe I would have left. But like number one, if you love the game, you don't want to leave. You want to keep playing it. And number two, especially when you've suffered so much for so long for a year, and then it would all be in vain, it would feel pointless. I would have thought, well, why didn't I just like study the game 11 months earlier, and then I could have saved myself 11 months of pain, or I could have just quit earlier. What's the point going a year and suffering and then quitting? Like, it's pointless. So I thought, I've got every reason to try and really maximize and go all in on this. And at the end of the day, if I've put everything on the table and I can't succeed, then that's fine. But at least I've given it the best shot that I can. So I guess that's kind of the mindset that I approach most things with. But yeah, I guess it was also the fact that if I've gone so long doing so badly at this game, I must be doing a lot of things wrong as well. So for me, it was kind of like the evidence that I needed to know how much of a shortcoming my method had to begin with. So I saw it more like an opportunity to kind of understand, where I'm falling short, rather than kind of thinking, oh, this is a disaster, I give up. It was more like, this is a learning experience. There's a lot of gold in this, and obviously there's a lot of hand histories that I played terribly that you can review and improve from. So yeah, there's just so many ways that I could improve from the experience itself that I wouldn't have been able to tap into any other way.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key things where when things aren't going well, so let's say a whole year for you, the inner voice gets quite strong of the self-doubt. Can I still do this? Can I beat these games? And for a lot of players, they can't rechannel that into how do I get better? They almost like have a bit of a fixed mindset where it's understandably a year is a long time to not get results, but they almost like get more and more defeated as time goes on. I speak to players all the time on long downswings, and they generally do okay for like a period of time on a downswing, but everyone's got a threshold where the self-doubt gets so strong. And when you speak with players who come to the side like yourself and high-stakes players, they often use that whole period very differently. The whole going through a tough period is like, well, I must need to get better. I need to do more. I need to figure new approaches, learn new software. So for you, as you were kind of struggling through this year, were you the whole time trying to problem solve it, or was there moments where you did go down that defeatist line where you're like, I'm not sure I've got what it takes anymore?
Yeah, I mean, in the year itself, if I'm being, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but that's kind of the way that I sort of self-evaluate. I would just think that year I wasn't giving a very good effort. That's the reason why I didn't do well for a year. I wasn't doing the introspection. Maybe obviously I would have been doing some stuff. It's not that I was like just going through the motions for a year and just like not learning. Of course, I was trying to get a bit better, but fundamentally, I wasn't doing enough. I think in life, there's many situations you get into where you kind of know something's wrong, but it's not wrong enough. Like, it needs to be completely fucked before you're going to really take action and sort it out. So probably I just needed like a total crisis to fix it. Whereas, that was a year. A month wasn't a crisis. 3 months was like a major inconvenience. 6 months is pretty terrible. But years like, okay, we're doing something. We're all in on this, or we're done, basically. Mm. So yeah, like I think I was like making small efforts throughout the year, but it was only when the full thing could happen I could like look back on it and be like, wow, okay, we need like major heart surgery now. How do we do that? And that's when I really got to work.
Yeah, it's almost like you need like that rock bottom moment to like kind of shake you out of it.
Yeah.
And very often we accept sloppy standards, like little like errors in our approaches, not fully putting the effort in, and we think, oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal. And the more you get away with that for a period of time, you build your standards almost like on I can get away with not doing the maximum, and then it takes a period of time to relearn. Like, wait a second, like if I'm doing something, why wouldn't I do it all out? And that kind of, like you said, that kind of period of time that needs to happen for you to fully embrace that way of thinking. It changes depending on what you're doing, how much you care about it. So yeah, for you, it's interesting that it took a year. Just knowing you now, it's interesting that it took a year. And it's interesting that, yeah, basically you finally got to a point when you had a change. So you mentioned when you finally went, let's call it all in again on poker, you started learning about softwares, learning about coaching. What were some of the big aha moments you had or breakthroughs that got you back to being a good winning player again?
Honestly, it was like the coaches that were available, because I was like, wow, this guy that beats me up at the tables, he coaches. Wow, I'm going to learn from the guy who takes my money. That would be useful. Instead of donating to him at the tables, I can actually pay him and I can get the value myself. So that was like an amazing opportunity. Back then, the coaching methods were a bit more like limited. You know, they were going to tell you their ideas, whether they come from, maybe intuition to some degree. Maybe there was some like science behind it, but it was not super like rigorous. So yeah, but that was good. And then there was some basic software that would be used, and they would use them better than other people. They would know how to interpret the numbers and be able to like educate you on it, like push fold ranges, calling ranges against shoves, and just very basic stuff like three betting, like three bet shoving. But back then, that was kind of there wasn't like an easy way to solve that. It kind of sounds laughable now if somebody wasn't like around back then, but back then that was like actually quite a challenging part of the game. So yeah, that helped a lot. Other stuff, I think understanding that I was going to need to use a combination of the best players and the best coaches in the game and what they can teach me, but I'm going to be able to distill that and still be an independent learner throughout the whole process. I still need to have full accountability for my development, and fundamentally, I need to take what they teach me and I need to take it to another level myself. So I'm not going to just be like, okay, I've been told this, I'm happy, this week I got my coaching, I'll wait till next week and I'll learn the next thing. I was always wanting to kind of take it to the next level, make sense of it myself, and then not necessarily improve on what the coach gave me. I would generally assume that what they gave me is the best thing available and that my own interpretation is worse. That's like the most objective thing to believe. But if there's a way I can use the tool, or they tell me that there's this thing that's worth studying, then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do as many of them as possible over and over again. So, for example, drilling these shoving ranges or calling ranges, whatever, like I just did it obsessively. So like at some point I just knew in my head I didn't even need to run a solver because I just done it so many times. So just basic stuff like that. And it's kind of like what you were saying, that people can get kind of complacent and lazy, and that's kind of the difference between the two people. One person does the bare minimum, or they do like an adequate amount, so they're kind of okay at that part of the game, and another person's just gone like to the nth degree, and they're just at another level completely, and that's obviously like a big competitive advantage to have, even though you're kind of studying a similar thing. So I think that there was stuff like that helped me.
So my question on that, what allows people like you to go to the nth degree? What motivates you and drives you? Because I feel like humans were generally driven towards comfort, to the easy route, the path of least resistance as such, but we can override that when we have a strong kind of purpose or drive to do something. And when you look at people who generally push all out in their endeavors, they just have a stronger motive to act. They're working towards something more meaningful. And the people who are complacent aren't like lazy by nature, or we could say we're all lazy by nature, but it's mostly they haven't found that thing to want to put the effort in for. So for you, how have you been able to, in many things you've done, what I've observed, find that kind of nth degree to push yourself and get more of yourself in what you do?
I think it's completely what you said, like absolutely purpose. Whenever I'm talking to students about this same issue, I'd say purpose is what you need to be identifying on. And yeah, like an identity is a part of purpose as well. So purpose would be, on the one level, it's like attaching to things that you're passionate about. So things that drive you, that are meaningful. That could be like, you feel useful if you do something, and another thing, you feel like you're wasting your time. Or it could be that this is meaningful for my existence because it helps the people around me. There's different ways. But then I think another aspect of purpose is like being congruent with your identity. So actually building an identity for yourself of like the person that you want to be, the way that you see yourself, the best version of yourself, both in terms of what you achieve, but also in terms of like how you behave and how you present yourself. And then, but yeah, basically doing stuff which is reflective of that. I think when you're congruent to an identity that you love and that you care about, that you think is good, then invariably you have the purpose, and then with the purpose, invariably the hard stuff feels worthwhile and doesn't feel so hard all of a sudden. Or if it does feel hard, you love the fact it feels hard. You relish that. You're proud of that. Like you're not trying to avoid the hard stuff. In fact, the fact that it's hard makes it more meaningful and more worthwhile, but only when, like you said, it's ticking these boxes, these kind of foundational things that kind of drive our purpose and like way of being in life as humans, I think.
Wow, so powerful. How does somebody start to shape their identity? Because I think for us, we're fairly good at knowing who we are and who we're trying to be, and we can act congruent with that kind of vision of ourselves, at least for the most part. And a lot of people, I think, struggle because they haven't got the identity they want to be, and the purpose is quite, let's say they haven't found a full connection with that purpose. So they're trying to do stuff to make money, to create freedom. It sounds good, and they've got some sort of desire to do that. The identity, they're almost like not where they want to be or who they want to be yet, and they struggle to think of themselves as a better version. So for yourself, what have you had to do to, first of all, shape the identity you wanted to become, and then act in alignment with that? Because I always feel that there's two steps. One is the deciding who you want to be in each moment and going forward towards a purpose often. Then also being congruent with that, like you said, and showing up as that version of yourself consistently enough that is just you. Like your people around you will go, oh yeah, that's you, that's your character traits, because you've stepped into that identity. So for you, when you've had to level up your identity, how have you approached that, and how have you got kind of clear on who you need to be going forward?
Yeah, so I think that the most foundational thing is that people try and figure this out by asking what do I need to do? What would make me feel a certain way? What would make me successful? I think that's just the wrong question. Like, it needs to be why. You start with why. That's really where you start. So you say like, like why would I play poker, for example? Like, it's not like what would poker give me? Like, would it give me this amount of money? Would it give me this amount of status? You start with like why. Like, why poker giving me money will. Why would that be important to begin with? So money would be important because it would give me freedom. Okay, so what kind of freedom? Okay, so I've got time freedom. I've got the freedom to buy stuff, or like to travel, or whatever it might be. And then you sort of ask, like, why is that fundamentally important to you? So you could say, well, having time is important to me because then I can spend time with my loved ones, for example. Or I can take care of things that need to be taken care of when it's important to do that, or traveling because it makes me better educated as to like cultures, and I learn more about myself through traveling. So when you answer these kind of whys, why is that important? Then you start like understanding, like why it is important rather than what it is. Because otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to just checkbox. You're going to like come up with all the things that you think are the right answers, and that are like generally, why you should do something. So we'll play poker because we'll make a lot of money. We'll be cool. We'll be free to travel wherever we want to, and some of those things might actually be legitimate for some people, but it might not be for you. Or maybe there's one thing that's like super important for you. Like for me personally, just having freedom is such a big thing, and it's not that I need to have like huge amounts of money, or it's not that I need to have like a lot of the other things that you might aspire to in poker. It's more just that I think that time's our most valuable currency, so the freedom of time, and then I can kind of exchange money for time. So if you make more money, then I'm going to have more time, actually. And then when I know why I want the time, because I've got these meaningful things behind it, then everything's so clear. And then poker's not this superficial thing that I'm doing, just going on a hamster wheel. It's actually fueling like this most foundational purpose that I have, which I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to do through anything else, really.
Alongside freedom, what are some of your other most important whys?
So I'll maybe like so it'd probably be like for health as well. So why would I do this if it's gonna like destroy my health, for example, or why shouldn't I do this if it's good for my health? So yeah, like an example of that would be deciding, even in my poker career, when I was doing Supernova Elite as one example. Okay, this is great. It's an amazing thing to accomplish. I'm young. I can get away with it. But is this a way that I would want to live my career for the next 10 years? Probably not. Like, I'm going to get burned out. It's going to come at a big cost. And you mentioned in the first time you did it, there was a big cost that came with it. So, yeah, like understanding what's important to you in terms of like helping your life and nurturing you and things that are going to harm you. And yeah, like you can kind of ask yourself the whys for those things. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think when you do explore your whys, they very often take you to your values and what your values are. So for mine, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and my values are basically growth, health, relationships, fun, and freedom.
Okay.
And
You got it all mapped out?
yeah, I got it mapped out, but it's almost like a simplification of the things that I do. If I'm in alignment with these, I feel good about myself and I'm happy and content. Now, all these values don't get juggled equally at all times, but over frames of time, like say a year, for example, all those values need to be fulfilled on some level, or I will feel an internal frustration or something's kind of missing. And that's often when people have like maybe midlife crisis, I'm guessing is in line with this. But yeah, I think understanding like what you value and why it's important to you, and then creating a life in alignment with that. I think once you can simplify to that, what are the things I value, and it's generally not more than 3 to 5 things for almost everybody, and then what things do I need to be doing to fulfill those values, it changes everything, because you don't need to be one-dimensional. So for example, for me, like say I thought achievement was a value of mine for a long time, and I realized it was growth, not achievement. And that actually opened up so many different avenues. Like I can get growth in the gym, I can get growth from financial, I can get growth from a business idea, I can get growth from a conversation like this. So now I'm much more versatile, because I know I'm not actually after anything external there. I'm just after the growth that comes from the doing it. And internally for me, that's my why. So it's a why that gets fulfilled. So yeah, I think anyone who's listening can try to figure out their values. There's definitely a process you can go to do this, and then create an identity around those values. So basically, the way I look at it, you should be a version of yourself who lives in line with your values the majority of the time. And if you do that, and if you think about what that looks like, and you map out the framework of that, you'll see the things you do every day and what you should be doing. You'll see things you're not doing, and there's a gap to bridge, which is I call it an identity gap. And the work is to close that gap till you're more congruent. So yeah, deep stuff. We go super deep on this stuff, but I think that's a good wrap up of that one. So for you, let's transition more to the more present day. Very interesting for you. I think you said, which you can clarify, that you pretty much retired from like playing for a while. You were doing more coaching stuff, and you were coming back and playing basically the big series online, the WCOOP, what's the WCOOP?
Scoop.
Scoop, and
WCOOP.
WCOOP, the new event, Scoop and the WCOOP. And for you, you were taking a bit more relaxed approach to grinding in general. You weren't doing the hardcore Supernova Elite grinds. So talk us through, first of all, what made you take a more relaxed approach to your grinding kind of schedules, and then talk through how that's allowed you to play with a bit more freedom.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's linked back to what we were just talking about, actually, because for me, I was pretty clear in my mind that poker is like a channel for freedom, rather than like in and of itself to just try and maximize and make more. And also, like what you were saying with the achievement, I totally agree with you. Like growth for me is very important as well, and it comes in a multitude of ways. So I was like, well, poker can offer many things. So if I'm got less time at the tables playing, I can skill up with my coaching, I can become a better student of the game, learn the game better, I can develop better habits in terms of the performance side of things that I can also pass on to my students, etc. And in general, these are just going to be very good transferable skills as well, both in poker and also in life in general. So I thought that I can get so much from approaching poker in that way. Poker is going to be like a vessel for this kind of multifaceted growth if I kind of approach it in that way. Whereas if I'm just like a workhorse grinding all the time and trying to maximize my volume as well, not just being a player, but like a player who tries to grind hard and that, sacrifice other things along the way, I'm going to be very one-dimensional, and I'm not going to get all this like multifaceted growth. So it's kind of like a long-term plan, and also trying to be congruent with my value system, like what you mentioned. And yeah, it's pretty natural with that in mind. I guess also because for the larger part of my career, I've been doing a lot of coaching anyway. It was sort of like a natural evolution in that sense, because it wasn't that I was having to make a choice. It was that I was already doing the coaching. It's just that now we're not going to do as much of the heavy grinding. The Supernova Elite program on PokeStars was taken away as well. So a lot of things kind of just worked out the way they did. And then it was like quite a natural progression, I would say.
And how did that change how you approach your grind when you did play? How is the relationship with poker different then?
Yeah, it's really good. And sometimes it can be frustrating because you come back, you feel so rusty, and you're like, gosh, if I was able to play week in, week out, I would just play a lot better than what I do, and I would be more up to date with how my opponents are playing and what they're perceiving. But on the other hand, you come with a real freshness, vibrance, and enthusiasm. You're so grateful for the opportunity to play because you don't get to play so often. Also, I live in countries throughout the year sometimes where I can't play, like I literally can't. That was another reason why I was sort of by circumstance not able to play at certain times of the year. So yeah, it just makes you very grateful and very hungry and excited. And at the same time, you kind of need to make sure that you bring your A game because you've got a limited opportunity. It's not that you're going to get a chance for 52 weeks of the year. You're going to get a chance for like 4 weeks or 8 weeks. So you need to really make the most of them. So I try and see it like a mission that I have each year. Each time that I play a series, it's like my mission. I'm going to try and accomplish it. I'm going to like get excited about it and plan and prepare and almost try and be a model example for my students as well and show them, okay, this is how I'm going to go about it. This is how you guys would go about it. And we'll try and solve this thing and like, yeah, get growth from it, learn through the experience and through the project.
Well, you've just accomplished your biggest mission in the last series. Talk me through what your mindset was coming into this. So you mentioned making sure you're well prepared and setting a good example for your students as well. Talk me through how you prepared for this most recent WCOOP series. What are some of the things that you feel are important when you're going into a big series like 3-4 weeks long? How did you prepare for that?
That's a good question. So I think each year it's kind of evolved. Initially it was very logistics based. So, getting into the right time zone to play. And that is actually a massive one. And for so many years I had resistance to do it because you're comfortable in your own surroundings, your own office, your own home, basically. And obviously the cost of relocating for a few weeks back then for me, it sounded ridiculous, to be honest with you. I'm going to spend thousands of dollars going abroad with no guarantee I'm going to win any money. Like, it just doesn't sound like a very good gig. But obviously as you get better, like that becomes more like a kind of business cost, if you like, and you get kind of calculated objectively. You realize actually at a certain level it's worth it. Obviously if you're playing low to mid stakes, it might not be still, and that's just it's just the way it is. You have to try and do the best that you can in the time zone that you're in. And then over time, like in the more recent years, it's probably evolved from being partly the logistics of the series, but much more to do with the psyche, to do with energy management and the mind and my mindset to make sure that I'm prepared mentally for the challenges that are going to present themselves. And then also when you're playing at playing higher stakes and in more competitive environments, it just becomes even more important to have an advantage in that area and also to be aware of where you're going to break down. Because even the best players in the world are going to have shortcomings. They're going to have things that kind of trigger them or moments where they break down or they're just not having their best day or their best week. And knowing how you can, handle that and navigate around it. So, yeah, I guess it's just like a type of maturity in a way. You're kind of growing. You're becoming a more mature individual, and also obviously really leaning into the mindset side of things and the deeper psychology that that kind of underpins it. So that's been the larger part of my focus for the last couple of years when it comes to preparing for series.
So what are some of the things you do specifically to prepare your psyche for playing the higher tournaments, deal with everything? Anything that comes to mind?
So there's obviously like the long-term project of the identity and building it up. So I need to have this identity that I am like a world-class poker player. I have edge over my opponents, but not just to tell yourself a pack of lies, but really behave and live in a way which represents that. So why would I have edge? Well, because I'm doing all this stuff all the time, etc. And then also just making yourself physically and mentally strong in general, like in a more general sense. So I'm going to make sure that my health is in order before I go there. It's not that I'm going to like spend 4 weeks being healthy. It's like I'm going to be trying to be healthy months previous to when the series begins, and mentally as well. I'm going to make sure that I deal with difficult things before I go away. Make sure that the work is off my plate a little bit before I get there. I'm gonna do visualization stuff of situations which tend to be difficult for me in poker, and then try and reframe them or understand a bit better. What's a healthy thing to kind of be processing in those situations, or also just to kind of journal what do I think subconsciously or consciously in those situations. Try and find the patterns of where those occur. I think a common one for a lot of players is like 3-bet pots when you get 3-bet pre-flop and you've got to decide what to do. So yeah, just things like this. In addition to that, I think a lot of it's indirect. So for me, doing therapy, doing deep work, trying to like just become a more solid individual in general, feel more comfortable in your own skin, and be happy with like the life that you're living, and also make peace with things that have happened previous. It's going to have a massive translation into poker. In general, a lot of the blow-ups that we have in poker are pretty much a consequence of those other things. And if you're trying to like solve those issues that come at the poker tables through, let's say, you get told to breathe like slowly for a few seconds in that situation, which is good. Like it's a good thing to do. You should do that. It's like one good tool, but it is still like it's just like patching over the crack that's going to leak anyway. Ideally, we'd like to just fix the crack so it's not there, and then we won't have to like put this band-aid over the top of it. We're not perfect. We're always going to be having like triggers and issues that present themselves. So we need to have this band-aid when needed as like a first aid. That's very important. But that's not to, we need to know that 80% of our journey is going to be just slowly becoming more accepting of who we are and our past and our present, and just feeling more comfortable about everything. And that will lead to you just feeling more comfortable at the tables as well, I think.
Love it. It's like preparing like an athlete. It's my philosophy as well. And you can tell for you, there's a lot of like short-term preparation. I say short-term, as you said, the months leading up to a series, you would get your diet dialed in, your energy levels dialed in, so you feel energized for that. You'd also be doing all the deep work on your identity, and also the therapy work to uncover some of the kind of root triggers and causes that may flare up at the poker tables. I think this is so important because like people will often think that it's all about performance on game day, like of the kind of series, which obviously that's a big part of it, but you can't perform at a high level unless you've done that kind of 80%, as I mentioned, the work in advance. So it's almost like, in my opinion, it's every day is like the work's in progress every day. You're building towards that outcome, and you don't like just peak for a period, but you do peak for a period, but the work is constantly getting put in to allow yourself the opportunity to be able to peak at the right time. So I think for you, the holistic approach like really resonates with me, of trying to figure out everything you need to do to make sure when it really matters, you're able to perform at your best. So for you right now, what are some of the things that you've had to put more time and energy into to make sure you can perform when it matters most? You did mention some therapies and going deep onto stuff there. Obviously, I know you're very good on lifestyle. What are some of the things you that are front of mind at this stage of your career in order for you to perform at your best?
Sleep. Honestly, I think that if I just become a master of sleep, then I've already won half the battle, to be perfectly honest with you. It sounds kind of crazy. I think there is a lot more of like a discourse and a discussion around this. People are becoming more aware that this is an important part of life. But for me, that was really a Pandora's box, that one single thing. And then there's other aspects of it. Just having daily rituals that are cathartic, like going for a morning walk and going for a walk in the evening as well, just getting outside, getting exposed to sunlight. Just enjoying nature, living a lifestyle which is gonna bring a good mental energy, and then bring that into the series, of course, and into my professional life when I'm playing. So, yeah, it's exactly what you were saying. It might seem like a bit detached and abstract, like, okay, it's cool, you got these things that you do, and it helps you a bit, and that's wonderful. But the thing that's important to kind of understand is that you're doing these things every single day of your life. Like, even if they have a tiny impact on any given day, over the course of thousands of days, they've had a sea change of an impact. So people kind of want to have this magic pill, which is, or this secret solution, which kind of solves everything. Or if you do this for a few months, you're going to be gold. But realistically, it's about understanding what the small things are that resonate with you. Maybe for another person, it's not that important to go for a walk in the evening, but for me, I really like it. Or to do a workout, or to eat some good meals, or have social interaction. But once you know what's really like a key driver for your performance, and you simply do it regularly for a long time, consistently, and it's not like an effort, it becomes just a part of your lifestyle. That becomes what you prioritize. You actually cancel the other stuff around it. Then you're going to succeed in whatever it is that you do. Now, it's not to say that you're going to be the best player at poker. Maybe that's not your calling, but in whatever you're able to become the best at, whether it's poker or something else, you'll give yourself the best opportunity simply by creating this life structure to start with. So even though it sounds a little bit kind of esoteric, I think it's actually like 90% of the success is in this.
Yeah, 100% agree. And like I said, like, there's not that many things you need to do to kind of allow yourself to perform at your best on a consistent basis, but it's crazy how few people do them. Whether it's getting good sleep, it's getting light exposure in the morning, it's maybe doing a meditation habit, exercise and movement most days, or at least every day in my opinion. And people just don't tick those boxes because they haven't created that identity around that, haven't linked it to the identity, so it's a detachment. So we're both big fans of sleep. We're both wearing a Whoop tracker right now, which is basically gives you good data on sleep. And yeah, I just want to double down on what you mentioned about sleep being one of the biggest performance enhancers. In myself, I started tracking this. Actually, this is as a present originally from some friends who were very thoughtful. And I started getting some data on my sleep, and I was like, I thought I was all right at sleep. And I was like, I'm not very good at sleep. I'm like, I was getting 50%, 60% on average, because this gives you a score of 100 for a recovery score. And I started to realize, oh, wait a second, like I started to read about sleep and get into it. This was like about 4 years ago. And then as soon as I started like kind of gamifying it and go, right, how do I get my sleep scores better? I think most people, if you speak to them, if they don't track it, they're very like, oh yeah, I sleep fine, I sleep okay, I sleep well. Or they'll say the opposite, I sleep bad, I'm not a good sleeper. But that just means nothing, and it gives you no data to work with. There's no quantitative.
It's not concrete.
It's not concrete.
And if you're doing well, you could do better maybe.
Exactly.
If you're doing badly, it's not the end of the world. You could do a little bit better, baby steps.
Exactly.
We can always grow.
Exactly. And when you quantify something like sleep, especially poker players, we love quantifying stuff. It gives you like an avenue of how am I doing in like real time, and how can I get better at this? And I'm still not an expert at sleep, but I feel now I'm pretty good at the game of sleep, of understanding what I need to do to sleep at a high level. And as you mentioned, like prioritizing it well enough so that it is taken care of to a high level, not just like, oh, I got, like some people I got 6 hours sleep or 7 hours sleep, I'm okay on that. It's like, you're okay on that? Like, this could be the difference between a really high performing day and an average day, just by how much sleep you got and the quality of that sleep. And yeah, I think spending time on, obviously I'm talking about sleep as a variable here, but understanding what are the variables that impact your performance the most, and getting a little bit obsessed about them for a period of time and seeing how that impacts your life, your performance. And once you do see that link, you can't stop yourself doing it. You can't stop doing it. Say for exercise for both of us, if someone goes, Alan, you can't exercise for a week, I'd be like, really? I was like, can I pay myself out of this? Well, how much can I pay so I can exercise this week? It's one of those things, because you see how it makes you feel, how it makes you perform, how it's aligned to identity, your values, and everything is better because you're doing that thing. And I think this, like I said, there's not 100 of these things, probably like 5 to 10 or maybe 20 on a list across the population. Find those things for you, do them often, and it's small steps, as you mentioned, that build up over time that have a cumulative effect, which is, yeah, so good to see. So I want to dive into now the actual WCOOP itself. And you had a little bit of success, let's call it. And I want to talk about your journey through the tournament. So I believe it was 5 days in total, or was it 4 days?
4 days.
4 days. Okay, so 4 days of grinding. Ivan messaged me on, I think, the third day or the second day.
Yeah, probably the end of third day, I reckon.
End of third day, and he said, it was chip leader with 30 to go, and you're going to come to Bali the following week, and you said, I hope I've got something to celebrate in Bali. And when I got that message, I was like, oh, Ivan must be really confident. And I went on to the Poker News and saw you were chip leader. So first of all, what was going through your mind as you were chip leader and going into through the tournament? And did you have a certain level of confidence that this was going to be potentially a big score?
So in terms of like whether I thought there was a chance for it to be a big score, I guess I kind of go in with a lot of confidence from the very beginning of the tournament. So I go into a tournament thinking that I can definitely win this tournament. And obviously you know that not very often you're going to win the tournament, but I go in with the mindset that this specific tournament that I'm playing right now, this can be the one for sure. Like, I'm going to play well and I got every opportunity. But then when I get into a very good situation, it's almost the opposite. Like, it's not that I'm saying, oh, now I can't win the tournament, I got all the chips, but it's more that I try and manage my expectations. So I think a lot of players get ahead of themselves, like, oh yeah, I got a big stack with 30 left, so I should win this tournament now. Like, you still got a very low chance of winning the tournament. I don't know what it would be in percentage terms, but it could be like as low as 5% or something. It's going to be pretty low chance still. So like I know that I have like a good opportunity. I know that it's going to be fun. I know that this is my career, why I play poker. I play it for the moments like these. Try and really appreciate it. Try and see the beauty in it. Like, wow, okay, I'm very grateful and privileged that I got this amazing thing. Like, I'm going to have a lot of fun. It's awesome. But in terms of like thinking it's on, like I always think it's on. But the paradox is that when I'm in a very good situation, I don't think much more. Like I always know that I have what it takes, but that in poker you're still most likely not going to get that final major outcome that you're looking for. So hopefully that sort of makes sense.
Perfect sense, yeah. So you were chip leader after day 2. That's about the time you messaged me. And then you were chip leader all the way to the end in terms of how days ended.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned to me privately, you said that's not exactly what happened. And some days you actually had big losses, like early in the day. So talk me through the kind of mindset of you're starting a day, let's say going to day three is a good example. You're chip leader that day. So there's a little bit of excitement building. There's $1 million up top. How do you, first of all, manage that expectation? And then first, when things aren't going so well, let's say you lose a percentage of your stack, how do you recalibrate your position in the tournament?
Yeah, so I guess the strange thing about me is that for me, the most important thing is to, I mean, obviously you want to win the tournament, you want to win a lot of money, but for me, on a kind of micro or on like an immediate term level, I just really care about playing well. Like I really like to do my job well. Whatever it is I'm doing, I like to do it to a good level. I like to be proud of it. Kind of like to, paint my canvas, so to speak. So it takes away the noise of like the future expectation of winning the tournament. How am I going to win? Blah, blah, blah. Because in the short term, I don't actually care about that. I actually care about just doing a good job, which is very useful because obviously the mindset advice it's given is that you want to be present-minded, to take it one hand at a time. But instead of me kind of having to convince myself to do that, I kind of just want to play each hand well and solve the puzzle. So it kind of takes away my forward projection, more or less. But in terms of like, going into the day three as the chip leader, so I have to make like a practical game plan, based on the table that I'm playing at, the stacks distributions, the pay jumps, and all this kind of stuff, and like what my image is like, and all these kind of things. And then in terms of when things, I started the tournament day pretty badly, I think, pretty much every day, and lost like a lot of chips. I think more or less a third of my stack, probably. But it was just a question of whether I thought I played the hands well or not. And obviously, even if you play them badly, you can't really beat yourself up about it. You're trying your best all the time, and it's not very helpful to, kind of get upset about mistakes that you make. You're always going to make mistakes. So, yeah, I mean, all the answers that I'm going to give you are going to probably sound like a little bit detached, but that's kind of the whole secret behind it, that I was never trying to really, I mean, apart from technically and strategically, I was never trying to navigate the tournament. The tournament was flowing based on everything that all of my belief systems, the way that I try to approach the game, the way that I engage with hands and problems to solve. I was just like kind of letting it flow, letting it follow its natural path that it had to, without really trying to do something about it. I'm just gonna do what I can in the hands that play out, and then I have to accept it, and then I have to try my best each time. So it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but the point is that in order to get this mindset, I think it's about working on all those very deep things that we've already spoken about, and then it kind of, you automatically feel this way when you play. There are other practical things I would mention. So, for example, if you're playing within your bankroll requirement, so that if you lose the tournament, it doesn't matter. And also, if you win the tournament, for some people, it's going to be life-changing. But if you're lucky enough that it's either not important to you, or that, like, financially, it's not going to make all the difference to your life, then it takes a bit of the pressure off as well. So I think for some of those things kind of removed the noise for me, because I just didn't really care that much about those other aspects, and then it just let me kind of deal with the job in hand.
Yeah, it's clear you built like an elite level mindset, and when you explain it, it sounds so kind of simple, but all those things you mentioned are very, very challenging for a lot of players to do in real time. So, for example, starting a day with a chip lead, you're generally going to get high expectations and get a little bit excited about winning. For you, because you're so process driven and you're more bothered about how you play technically and executing and painting your canvas to a high level, that doesn't really affect you. Obviously, there'll be some sort of acknowledgement of where you're at, but it's not a driver of your performance. You don't care much about the results. Obviously, you want to win the tournament for the title in particular, but again, it doesn't really cause a performance drop off because there's not really pressure on that to do that. So for you just were able to be process driven the whole time and allow the tournament to unfold based on where you're at. And also, you've done so much work on yourself internally that you are content with yourself. There's no belief systems coming up. There's no imposter syndrome. There's no getting in your own way. So a lot of work, I'm guessing, over a lot of years to get to that level. And then when you explain it, it sounds so simple. But for players who are listening to this, they'll be like, I wish I could do that. And yeah, I'm guessing, like, let's say, like, would there be a time period when this started to click for you, when you felt like you were able to step into letting things flow? I'm guessing this hasn't been throughout your career. I'm guessing there's been a transition. How over what time? When was it that started to click, when you started to think this way and have a mindset like this?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say is that, like, I still do have all these insecurities. I still do get all this noise in my head. It's just that I kind of have a way of shutting it out. And even like the imposter syndrome, like, comes all the time. I actually do suffer from that quite a lot, actually. So it's about it's about simply being able to deal with it. A good analogy is that I remember hearing something. I think it was about Paula Radcliffe, and it was about the pain of being a marathon runner, and she was like the best. And it was like we feel the same pain our entire career. It's just that we learn to become at peace with it. It's not that by becoming the best in the world that you suddenly no longer suffer it. Actually, you suffer the same thing. Your experience with it changes. So I think it's the same for me. Like, I still have all these problems that everybody deals with. I still get worried about an opponent wrecking me at the table. He outplays me in a hand, or I do something that was a bit silly, or like I look at the tournament lineup, or maybe in the past, and I would be a little bit intimidated, or feel like where's my edge going to be? But you just you just have like this foundational structure within yourself, which kind of is okay with all of those things. So sometimes the solution to the problem is not getting rid of the problem, it's simply becoming peaceful with the problem such that you don't really see it as a problem to begin with. So like, okay, cool, I've got imposter syndrome, or I've got, for example, Leonard at my final table or whatever. I actually don't care. Like, I can acknowledge it. I can be like, okay, this guy is like supposedly, the GOAT, or one of the very best of all time. He's a fantastic player. Great. That's wonderful. I can reframe it. Reframing it, seeing it as a positive, seeing it as an opportunity, will help a lot. And even if you can't do that, and even if you are just genuinely getting like anxiety or stress or existential angst from any of these things, just being like aware of the fact that you're getting that, and being like, okay, we're getting it. We're not going to die. Like, we're going to get through this. It's fine. Like, it's just an experience, like a lot of experiences. I think the other thing that's helped me, so this is like more directly answering your question. I think going back to like my past, and I had like quite a few bad things happen. One was like when my mother passed, but another thing was my stepniece actually got a brain tumor when I was about 17, 18 years old, and she passed away. And when you've had like very traumatic experiences happen at a young age in your life, everything else just doesn't seem that important all of a sudden. So I think that those things have kind of helped me in the professional environment to just not feel the same level that I feel pressure in terms of like a perfectionist kind of pressure of like, oh, if I make a mistake, I struggle with that quite a lot. But in terms of like the general things that people worry about, like fear of failure, for example, I don't care at all. Like, I'm totally fine with failure. Like, in fact, the more failure, the better, because I'm hopefully going to have a success through some of those failures. So yeah, like worrying about the worst case scenario is a lot easier when you realize what's relative. And I think that's been a really deep driver for me my whole life and everything that I've done, and probably was like linked to this tournament itself.
Yeah, I think the skill there to learn is perspective. Put things into perspective relative on the scaling of things. So real extreme events are obviously so painful and so deeply profound compared to what can happen at the poker tables. And sometimes you lose sight of that. You lose sight of an all-in or a big tournament feels like life or death when it's just not. So having that kind of skill to have that perspective. And something you mentioned as well, which like the skill of almost like acceptance and not trying to fix things. And I think this is really challenging because most poker players I speak with, and myself, I include them, I think this way as well, we pride ourselves on our ability to solve problems and fix things. So when something comes up emotionally, anxiety and insecurity, we feel like we need to fix it, like get rid of that thing. And as you mentioned, which I completely agree with, sometimes we just need to be okay with that, just to observe it, just be present enough to go, I feel insecure right now, I feel anxious. I'm okay with that. Yeah. And to say I'm okay with that and not have to fix it, because the mind's, in my opinion, is a fixer machine. It just always tries to fix things. And for you to be okay in the midst of not feeling how you want to feel is a superpower. So for you, I'm sure that going through the tournament, there's times where you maybe felt heightened emotions, maybe some anxiety or things going on, but you are okay with that as well. So I think it's a huge, huge lesson. So I want to go into the final table itself. So I think you were a massive chip leader from what I remember going into the final day. And you had some of, like you said, some really good players on your table, on the final table. And you mentioned to me that you had like a bit of a different approach to how most people generally talk about playing a big stack. So talk me through your kind of philosophy coming into the final table, both from a mindset perspective, but also in terms of what strategy you were going to go for.
Sure. So yeah, obviously the final table was a really interesting experience that I'll never have again. The day leading up to it, and then the morning. In fact, there's a lot of other stuff that happened that people wouldn't be aware of going into this tournament. I had to move apartments literally a day before the main event. I was tracking with my WCOOP watch my recovery in general. It was towards the end of the series, but I'd literally taken like half a week off just to make sure that I was really primed for the final weekend, because I really wanted to be fresh for it. And I was getting terrible recovery scores, like terrible, almost like when I would get sick or when I had COVID or something. So I thought, I'm sleeping well. I'm not really doing anything every day apart from stuff that's good for my recovery. how can this be happening? And actually had like a mold problem in the apartment. It's pretty bad. So I was like, okay, I just got to leave my apartment. And luckily the Whoop kind of saved me with that. It gave me the opportunity. And then there was like some like technical issues on PokerStars. A lot of people were getting booted off randomly during the tournaments, and that happened to me every day of the main event, apart from the final table day. I think luckily it didn't happen on the final table. But then again, I moved to my friend's apartment to play literally because I knew that in the apartment I was staying in it was still happening. So yeah, I had to do a few things like that to be ready. But in terms of like how I felt going into the final table, obviously I was like pretty anxious or pretty excited, but it's almost like it was such a big thing that I couldn't really process it. Like if if it had been a bit smaller, I would have been able to process it, and it would have been maybe even overwhelming or like a pretty formidable thing. But because this was like so crazy, it was just like I just didn't even bother trying to process it. I couldn't even think about it really. So I was kind of just treating it like a problem again. So going into the final table, I was preparing for my final table, doing my research, kind of learning a bit about my opponents, kind of assessing what a good strategy would be with my stack, etc., and fundamentally just trying to get a good night's sleep. And weirdly enough, I actually got an amazing sleep. I slept like a baby that night. The previous 2 nights, I didn't sleep hardly at all because I also had a deep run on GG in the main event there. There was a tournament with like nearly 3 million for first, and I came 21st in that one. So that night I was completely buzzing on caffeine, like 6-7 shots of caffeine in that evening, trying to get through the day 2 on that one, and like day 2 on that one, and it was probably day 2 or day 3 on this one. But that I was so tired from those days that probably that helped me just sleep before the final table. In terms of the mindset stuff, I try not to do things in too much of a rush before I sit down to play, because I think you bring that energy with you when you play. So I need to try and give myself enough time to set up. I need to, breathe slowly, maybe do some breath work, have everything ready in advance, feel comfortable in my surroundings, just have a bit of quiet time really. I think that's quite important. I think there was research done on that actually for university students, like the type of music they would listen to before an exam and how quickly they would walk to the university hall would actually have a correlation with their performance in the exam itself. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, so that's that stuff. In terms of like how I went about the final table itself with the strategy, I guess it's about being aware of what's expected of you. So, you're the chip leader, it's kind of expected of you that you'll play a certain way, and then just to be aware of that and to be able to use it to your advantage in situations and to try and be careful of the pitfalls that might present themselves. I think too many players kind of feel like, okay, I have this big stack, so I'm just allowed to do whatever I want to do, whereas I don't really see it that way. And also I knew that it was going to take a long time, this final table. It was a very deep stacked final table, so it kind of changes the way that it plays because everybody's got quite a lot of chips. There's a lot of poker to be played, so I just accepted that, tried not to come out of the blocks too fast, although I bluffed a large part of my stack off unsuccessfully early on anyway, so that was despite my best efforts. But yeah, despite doing that, I was not really in a rush. I was kind of ready to just play relatively slowly and let things take their course.
And you mentioned throughout the tournament you were quite in the flow and process driven. That changed when you got the heads up. And you mentioned to me you had like quite a big chip lead. So talk to me when things went to heads up, how things in your mind changed and what was going on during that.
Yeah, so that was kind of a strange thing. For the final table, when I first sat down to play, obviously felt a bit anxious. It's like when you start any big thing, you kind of feel a bit nervous at the beginning, then you kind of find your flow, and that was great. So for most of the final table, it was pretty comfortable. But then when I got to the heads-up stage specifically, for some reason, then I was getting a little bit overwhelmed, actually. I was like, holy shit, like, wow, okay, one of us is going to win the World Championships, and I've got like 10-1 chip lead or whatever it was. So number one, this is on. So now I actually think it's on. And number two, if I somehow lose this heads up, this is going to be the worst thing ever. Like, this is just going to be absolutely horrible. So then I created this massive expectation, which is obviously what you don't want to do. But I did it, like I couldn't help it. So even with my best efforts, I couldn't. And then that was really affecting the first few hands that I played. I really just couldn't switch on. I couldn't be present-minded. I was struggling so much with that. And then I got dealt king, so that was good.
Was that the final hand?
Yeah, that's the final hand. So, no, but I mean, I'm being a little bit sarcastic. I think I played okay. Like in most part, I had to make a few difficult decisions, avoid losing some bigger pots before that, and even in the king's hand, like being able to play a hand where you have an opportunity to the best of its ability, could make the difference between winning a stack or not winning it. Like You know, if you get a good situation, you're probably going to win money in that situation, but the best players will win the maximum and the other players might win less, and they don't realize that there was a different way to play. So I'm not saying that the hand would have played any differently any other way, that specific example, but in general, there are many examples where it did make a difference. So yeah, you've got to really have presence of mind, even when it looks like you've got a good situation. And I think I managed to do that in the end. But yeah, I think this kind of forward expectation is like the biggest crippler for, and even with my own students, it's a big thing that comes up. I get final 2, final 3 tables, suddenly I'm like seeing that there's like 50k up top or whatever it is, and I'm the chip leader. Just this enormous expectation, not just in terms of being able to play well at the tables, but also the come down. So when they bust in 11th position, they just feel so dejected from what happened, and it really affects them for a long time afterwards. And it might even create a trauma where when they get into a similar position, they're like, okay, I know how the script ends with this one. And they're just thinking about way too many things rather than just what's happening in front of them. So it's difficult. I think like a lot of things in life, everybody has a breaking point and a tolerance level. So imagine different people of different temperaments, and one person's going to get very angry in one situation, whereas another person's very zen-like. But that Zen person probably has a different situation or a level of tolerance where they go beyond their breaking point as well. So, you know, when you become aware of that, my breaking point was the heads up in this tournament. Luckily, that was quite far in. But we're all going to have those points, and it's becoming aware of it and just becoming better gradually. Like, you don't need to fix it. You're not going to fix it, actually. That's kind of the point. It's like... it's the manifestation of everything that you've done prior, and you're going to learn through that experience, even if you don't navigate very well and you feel like you were all over the place and you didn't give your best. You did give your best. It's just your best is not what you hoped it would be. And next time it might be better, or maybe it won't be, but eventually it will be if you pursue the course. So I think a large part of us struggling to be present-minded and process-driven in those situations is this kind of this unhelpful inner voice telling us that we're not able to be present-minded. It's not the fact that we can't be, it's the fact that we're telling ourselves over and over again that we can't be, rather than just accepting. It's kind of similar to what we were talking about before. So you don't solve that problem in the situation. It's already been, that's like, for me, and this kind of goes back to something we were speaking about earlier, actually, talking about a lot of people think that the game day is when everything matters. Like, today is when I'm going to have my success. I reframe it completely. My success was already destined. Like, everything that I should have been doing in the last 10 years or whatever it is, that's going to be like, you know, the script that's going to play out is going to be based upon that. So whatever I should have been doing is important, and that will lead to the outcome. But it's certainly not going to be this one day today. Today is just like enjoying the script play out. Like, this is the movie. I'm going to sit in the theater and watch what happens today. I'm not going to think that I'm the protagonist that suddenly changes the script this one day. I'm going to act out my last 10 years, basically. I think if you buy into that mentality, then when you get into these situations where you're freaking out deep in a tournament, and you remind yourself of that fact, you're like, okay, well, this is the movie playing out right now. Maybe it's not such a good movie today, but it is what it is.
Wow, that's so powerful. It almost makes me think like there's no big days. And I think the MTT culture, I've worked with many MTT players the last year in particular, probably more so than any other format. The culture in MTTs is different to other formats. Like, you guys get excited by a Sunday. Like, a Sunday's a big day.
I get excited by it as well.
Yeah, but the culture of a lot of MTT players, because you can get these like life-changing scores any kind of moment, especially when there's a series on, it builds up this expectation of this could be the big day.
Yeah,
but as you mentioned, that although it might even play out that way, like for you when the World Series there, it doesn't actually. That's not actually what happened. Like, you actually, it was a 10-year gradual process for you, 15 years overall, let's call it, and all the days. Every single day was equally important. This is just like the kind of fruits of your labor, so to speak. But I think MTT players in particular really struggle with not getting so results oriented in the moment. As you mentioned, like, there's a kind of threshold where players start looking at how much prize money's up top, and they can't be free in the moment. They can't play poker with presence, so to speak, because they're so thinking about either not making a mistake, not messing up, how much money they could make. And then, as you mentioned, often in these scenarios, they won't get the big score. They'll bust out somewhere on the way. They might come fifth in this tournament, and that leaves a massive scar because they were chip leader for like a long time, and now they're disappointed, and because they're so anchored to potentially winning that. So yeah, I'm trying to think for players who are struggling with that, how do you how would you tell players to try to lower that expectation? Let's say they do care. Let's say that they are at a point in their career where it would change their life to win this tournament. They're going into a series. They do have some pressure on themselves, and they really want to do well. And then they get a big stack in a tournament. They start having a good run. How would you get players to maybe think through lowering expectations and being more performance driven during that period?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few different angles that you could take with it. One would be to kind of encourage them that it's not as important as they think it is, because if you really think that you've got a career in this game and that you've got long-term edge for a long period of time, why the hell does it matter whether you win this tournament? It's like the scarcity mindset that, oh, this is my one opportunity, so like, yeah, if I don't get this one, I'm not going to get anyone, kind of mindset. Whereas if you instead thought, you know what, this is my vocation, I on average do pretty well at this thing, and it might be today or it might not be, but sure as hell it will be someday, and over the long course I'm going to do very well. If you've got a very long-term mindset, you don't care so much about the little dots on the map. And when I think about the number of blow-ups I've had and mess-ups and the number of tournaments that didn't go my way, or I just gave away my stack basically, or just didn't play correctly, I mean, if you added up all the money, it would be unimaginable. Like, really, it would. But I'm not a bot, you know. Like, I'm human. I make mistakes. Like, my edge is a function. My edge is in spite of the fact that I make all these mistakes and that I don't win every tournament that I play. Like, that's expected. So if you don't have this scarcity mindset, if you think that you're looking at your success over a long period of time, it helps. And I think if you really dig into like the players' problems, the problem is obvious. In my opinion, is obviously not like the fact that they can't perform in that situation. It's all the things that are the reason why they can't perform in that situation. Like, oh, I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills in 2 months or something. So that's like a tangible problem that has a tangible solution that being an MTT player can't solve. And that's kind of where the pressure comes from. You need to solve it in other ways, like just get a job would be a good suggestion if you can. Obviously, if you can't, it's unfortunate. But in most cases, you could try your best to get a job, and that would help. You shouldn't be relying on poker to solve that problem. And ideally, if you're like a high-level professional who's been in the game for a while, you try not to be in that situation in the first place. So you try to have longer for the reserves. You try and reduce your expenditure months before you get to that situation in the first place. And then, lo and behold, you don't care about that situation so much when you get into it, because it's not going to make or break your life. But I think for many players, it actually does. They're in a situation where it is very important. But in terms of, let's say that you don't have a financial difficulty, you're very comfortable financially, but you still have this problem psychologically, then I would say the reason for that is an identity thing. You don't believe in yourself enough. You believe that in order to have validation that you're the player that you want to be, will be through winning this tournament, but not without it. And that's obviously something that you can work on in a different way. So it's about, obviously your identity, believing that you are a winner, knowing, not just believing a narrative, but having objective data to suggest that you are a winner. And if you don't, then you might want to play a lower buy-in, prove yourself there, work your way up. There's always ways that you can prove over a sample that you're doing pretty well. Data is a lagging indicator. It's never present. It's always like showing you what was the case in the past. You don't ever know exactly where you are at in poker, but it gives you some indication at least. And then also, if you're like a person in the game that wants to do well over a long period of time of like 5 years, even if you're not doing so well for 6 months or a year and you know your game's not the best, you've got work to do. Your coach might have told you that your game needs to level up a bit to kind of have edge. You've got a long time. Like, if you give yourself that time, you're going to have less pressure in the short haul. So, I say that it usually comes from one of those two things, and then there's a few different ways that you can kind of tackle it.
Yeah, love that. I think the long-term mindset as well is so key. I think a lot of expectations come from being very short-sighted and wanting the win quickly, wanting it today, this week, this month. The longer you can spread out your horizon, almost the less expectations you have, because you give yourself time to make things work and to almost get the results that you know you're going to get. Again, the identity thing is so important. I really like that you touched on that again, in terms of, one, understand that you can do that, but also, which I think is even more important, you don't need the external validation to feel good internally.
That was another thing that I was going to mention as well, actually. And this is something that Elliot Rowe mentioned, so it's not from me, I learned it from him. This idea that most poker players, they've wrapped so much of their identity in them as a poker player specifically. It's not about like other aspects of their life. It's like, if I'm an amazing poker player, I'm an amazing human being, an amazing person. It gives me like my self-worth. So of course, when you're not doing very well, you feel like pretty low self-esteem. But imagine that you had a more rounded life and you valued yourself in many other ways. Then poker's just one small part of it. Then it doesn't matter so much. You're taking the pressure away. So I think that's a massive one as well. If you can make it so that poker, even if poker did badly for 5 years, even if you became a washed-up reg that never won again, it's not the end of the world. Like, this was one part of your life, maybe a less significant part than others. Then, no matter what happens, it can never be that bad. But when poker is like 95% of you, then you're only left with 5% if it's not doing so well.
Yeah, I picture myself when expectations got the highest, or I put the most pressure on myself, is when I was too all in on poker. Like, nothing else I was doing in my life that was progressing. So I lived and died by my results of the tables. And I can picture that time where I had so much more emotions, so much more tilt, so much more frustration, anger, because, like I said, everything, your identity was wrapped up in the pursuit. And then you use the metrics of winning as a validation of, I'm a good person, I'm worthy, I'm a version of myself I'm happy with based on this card game I'm playing. And when you stop and look at that, you're like, wow, like, that's a bad model to build, for one. And it's like so far from most people want to build for an identity for themselves, that there should be much more multifaceted. So yeah, so deep we could go on this one. I want to quickly transition into the stress of playing a tournament of this nature. So it was 4 days, and you showed me your WCOOP data, which blew my mind. So basically, WCOOP has a kind of stress score on it, and it tells you if you're in low stress, medium stress, or high stress over the course of a day. I don't check mine every day, but generally a normal day, you have high stress, say 1 to 3 hours of high stress. And this just means you're in a sympathetic nervous system. You're basically, stressed out is the easiest way to say it, and your body's activated. And you sent me your data, and during the tournament, I'm not sure which day it was, you were in a high stress zone for, I think it was over 10 hours.
Yeah.
So talk me through how that feels to be highly stressed, and how do you manage that high level of intensity for a long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely astonished when I saw the data myself. Like, that's crazy when you think about it. High stress is the kind of thing that you should get from doing a workout or something like that. And then, a very bad, a situation that you don't want to have in your life. You're dealing with something annoying, or you have an argument, or a very stressful situation that you need to sort. So imagine that for over 10 hours of a day, you're in that zone. It's just, and you're not even doing something physical particularly. It's just kind of, it's crazy. And I don't think it's such a good thing, actually. But of course, that specific day was like the main event Sunday, so it's a unique day of the year. And also had these things like the technical issue with the internet happening while I was playing. That was during that session. And then the session just lasted forever because I made the day 2 of these tournaments. So it's very elongated. In terms of how I manage it, I would say, if I've got to be completely honest about it, I manage it quite badly. That's one of the things that I struggle with as a poker player. Is the fact that because I have quite a perfectionist mindset, I'm very obsessive about like my play, and it just creates a lot of stress. So probably hypothetically, in most games that I play, apart from the very toughest ones, I could probably play my C game, kind of autopilot, not put so much pressure on myself, and do okay. Like, I'm not saying I would do amazingly well, but I do fine. And then hypothetically, I could do it with not so much stress. But given the way that my personality is, I just can't function that way. So it comes with an advantage, which is that I think that I can really give absolutely everything that I've got to give when I play. But the downside is that how long can I sustain that for without like just putting myself through the ringer far too much? So I think that's one reason why I got those crazy stress scores as well. So I'm not the best person to like kind of be a role model for this. But in terms of what I try to do about it, off the tables, is like, of course, if I'm going to have such a stressful existence when I play, I've got to make sure that when I'm not playing, I'm going to be, managing my stress and relaxing a bit more. So I've become a lot better at that. I've understood the things that are very therapeutic to me, that can help me kind of calm down a bit and relax and enjoy. Try not to overload myself with work to try and neutralize the demands of the poker. So yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate this. They think it's okay. For example, they're going to grind a Sunday and then they're going to like, watch some videos on YouTube after they finish, or they're going to, I don't know, play some video games on the computer for a few more hours afterwards. But like, your eyes need a rest, your mind needs a rest. Like, you need to kind of just turn off completely if possible. So if you compared that like reality to just going out and walking your dog if you have one, or just walking by yourself in some fresh air, it's such a different thing that you could do, or going for a bath or whatever it might be. And I think people just underestimate these small things. Or before you play, instead of like watching telly or playing some games or whatever it is that you might do instead, again, going for a walk. Usually this is the common thing, like trying to get away from that thing that's the most similar to playing poker. Playing video games is the closest thing to playing poker, apart from maybe with some of the stress that might come with it. And watching telly, whilst it's better, it's still like a screen. It's still sedentary. So I know you're a big believer in movement, and I am as well. So yeah, movement and nature, fresh air, etc. I see it's like an antidote. So let's accept the fact that, especially playing an MTT grind, it's not optimal for health. Like it can't be. But a lot of things in life are not, and that's okay. We don't need to be optimal all the time, but we need an antidote. And if we're not doing what we can to try and neutralize the negatives, then we might set ourselves up for a problem. And also, of course, like managing the grind for the week. Don't play every single day. Know how you're going to recover. Know how much recovery you require, and kind of stay true to that. So those kind of things to try and neutralize the stress that you get from it.
Yeah, so important. I think it's, like I said, it's so under-discussed, understood, but at the same time, like when we stop and reflect on it, we can see that certain things cause like stress, activation, stimulation, and they push. I almost think on like almost a seesaw going back and forth. And if we're pushing things too hard one way, at some point we need to rebalance it with the recovery stuff. And for you, for example, doing these really extreme grinds, you realize that you can't push other things as well. You can't push the gym and do 1RM stuff. You can't be reading like hard books to understand, doing video gaming, because all of those are draining the same system, which is already getting drained. And I think a lot of people over drain themselves and they don't recover and get that balance for themselves. So I think this plays out in two ways, the way I see it. One is day to day. So how much day to day stimulation, activation can you take on, and how much do you need to balance that to create a kind of 24-hour kind of balancing act. However, life isn't perfect, and for you, for example, playing these tournaments like deep into days, you're going to go way off the other end for a certain period of time, and the body is actually fine with that. The body can tolerate 10 hours of stress. However, there's going to be a recovery process that's needed for that. It's relative. So understand that sometimes when you go out of sync, you don't need to get back in 24 hours, but over the next 3 or 4 days, I'm guessing, after the event finish, you'll think, right, recovery now, I need to get back in balance. I'm overregulated, I'm dysregulated actually, and I need to get myself back in balance. So for you, do you think about it in terms of that, and how do you, when you've went over the edge, so to speak, and pushed up hard, how do you try to get back in balance to recalibrate?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, after the tournament finished, I felt like I needed a lot of recovery. I feel like I need more of a long-term recovery, to be honest, because it was like a long series itself. It was for a few weeks, but then that last period, the final week and the final main event weekend, it just kept going on and on, 4 days non-stop. So yeah, that's an unusual situation. You wouldn't usually have it quite to that nth degree, but since I have, I know that I'm not going to have a superficial solution to it. It's kind of, I actually need to honor my body and mind and give myself a bit of time. Like, it's not that even just a few days, maybe a few weeks of not doing nothing. It's like I'm gonna gradually ease my way back into those types of things that push me to that level of stress. Like you said, with the training, even the fitness training, I'll do it. I'll try and get back into it, but I'll increase the intensity over time gradually. And the less prior stress you've had, the quicker you can go and notch up the intensity, and vice versa. So yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's just about finding the right calibration based on what's happened prior. So for me, because I feel like this was quite a profound thing, both in terms of the demands it had, but also even the fact that I won the tournament as well. It's like quite a lot to process emotionally. It's obviously an amazing thing, but it's still something to process. It's a pretty big thing. So yeah, giving yourself time and honoring that and being okay that it could take quite a long time. It could take a few weeks, not trying to rush things too much. And the mind and the body are very intuitive. They'll tell you if you listen to them. So you kind of know what's working and what isn't, and you kind of need to become a bit more self-aware, I think, and then just sort of don't try and go against it too much. Once you've got a good system that works, or you learn from others ways that work really well, trying to fit them in and have a structure that's effective, rather than trying to wing it like what I used to do in the beginning of my career, having a structure that works and then kind of trying to stick to it as best as possible.
Yeah, I think as well is knowing that stress can be good for you. It often is good for you in small doses if we get the adequate recovery. And I think often people who maybe don't build a tolerance for stress, like they can either go one way or the other. They can be overwhelmed when they're in a high stress scenario, And because they don't frame it well, and because they don't take the precautions to kind of get back in balance, the stress becomes maladaptive, so it burns them out. I speak with lots of players and try to break down their kind of relationship with stress, because I'm always like, you keep telling me you want to lower stress. Lots of people want to lower stress. Where my whole thing is you want to be able to tolerate more stress. And to tolerate more stress, you actually need to get better at balancing it and almost like neutralizing, as you mentioned, the antidote. Because if you do that, you can take on more and more stress, and our body responds well to stress. You want to be someone who's in a high stress scenario who feels good. You want to be able to take on a lot of stress and recover quickly. And those things don't happen by chance. That you've got to put yourself in those environments and find that kind of sweet spot where you're recovering enough and you can go again. Same with the gym. The gym's a good analogy, because if you recover well from workouts, you will adapt to that stress of the workout and get stronger. If you overshoot the stress of the workouts, all of a sudden it becomes maladaptive and you start making decreases in your kind of fitness, as we both know from strength training. So yeah, so many things on stress. I think it's a huge conversation we could go into. We're going to run out of time. The studio's going to probably close on us very soon. But finally, I want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think this conversation's been very interesting. I think anyone watching this is going to take a lot away. Any parting words for anyone listening to this who might get inspired to want to follow by example? And some of the topics we talked about have been identity related, about finding your purpose, and about finding that kind of high performance way of operating for yourself. Any kind of parting words you'd like anyone listening to?
I think it's kind of similar to what I said before. Try to look over a long-term horizon. I think that's helpful. There's so many amazing resources out there today. I think YouTube's got so much good content. Audible, you can get amazing books. There's so many good podcasts to check out as well that have a lot of good information on things. And it should be very individual as well. Like, kind of find what resonates with you. It's not that you have to do everything perfectly and do everything that is recommended, that is supposedly like beneficial for performance. It's about finding what works with you and what also you're willing to do, and then gradually try and progress and build upon that over a long picture. But it needs to be not kind of superficially done just for the purpose of like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to do this because I'm going to be a better poker player, win more money. It needs to be something meaningful. Like, you got to find meaning in what you do, and why you're waking up in the morning and choosing to do that over another thing. And if you do the deep work and you kind of answer those questions, also understand that like you're never going to be the perfect version of yourself that you're aspiring towards. You simply just need to be a bit better each day, and to try and feel happy about the way you're going about things. Then trust that will lead to amazing things that you can't even comprehend. So start small and think big would be my recommendation.
Love it. Great words. And yeah, thanks again for your time. Hopefully anyone watching this has got a lot of action items to take note of and are inspired by Ivan's journey. So thanks for joining us to the end. Drop a comment below with your biggest takeaway from this conversation, and thanks for watching.